Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Hi there, welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about outgrowing relationships, navigating changes during spiritual growth. You know, one of the most uncomfortable parts of growing and healing spiritually can be the change that takes place in our relationships. I remember being sort of introduced to this concept before entering the energy medicine program that I did back in 2015. At the time, a friend of mine was also really interested as well. She had some serious hesitations, though. Now, the two of us had been on this spiritual path together for a while and learning a lot from each other, and it was really great to have this friend. So, of course, I wanted her to join the program that I was in, and she had a very significant response. And she said point blank to me when I asked her about joining, she said, "I don't think it's a good idea." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "I'm afraid my marriage won't make it." And it hit me. Whoa, right? This is like a thing. This is a really big deal that I had been naive to as well, and therefore had to look at how this impacted my own relationship and relationships as I move forward on this path, because it does impact our relationships that we currently have at all stages of our life. And it's a really big deal for people. In fact, this topic comes up frequently in therapy. It comes up when I'm teaching Reiki and any type of energy medicine stuff and spirituality stuff. This comes up all the time. It comes up in Facebook groups and other circles where people feel they can share their truth, that they can actually talk about this because other people will get it. And so if you're going through this right now, or you've been through it before, I just want you to know you're not alone. Sure enough, it became clear to me that on this path of growing and healing and spiritually becoming, many relationships will shift for many different reasons. But the one underlying factor that is consistent is that it becomes more and more uncomfortable for you to stay in a box that no longer fits. What was once the usual way of relating or, the usual way of being, it no longer feels right. Or perhaps what you were willing to tolerate once, you just can no longer. The constitution of your being depends on it. And so there's all these things that start shifting and changing. And sometimes it's over time, and sometimes it comes on hard and fast. So today, we are going to address how to know when it's time to leave a relationship or when it's time to simply adjust, and how to do both with grace and compassion and to stay in alignment of your spiritual service to yourself, right? What you're trying to do here and grow and evolve as a human soul person. So let's start by addressing the key signs that tell you a relationship is no longer aligned for you. I think it's important that we just acknowledge some of these quick hits here. So one is going to be that you don't feel well physically or emotionally after spending time with them. Maybe you feel drained. Maybe you feel anxious. Or perhaps you feel resentful after interactions with this person. Now, here's the thing. Resentment is an important warning signal that you are getting triggered in your own stuff. And somebody may not be respecting you in the way that you want. And so, whatever your wound button is, whatever your stuff is, you're going to get that button pushed from this person. And your job is to show up for that for yourself, to heal the resentment, to identify the need that you have, to know that you're enough having that need, and to communicate that need in an appropriate way. So I do encourage you not to get into the habit of feeling kind of resentful or having all these big emotions around people that don't seem to be fitting in your life. And we'll get more into this. But just paying attention to what's my stuff in this, that's always really important. Because we don't want to go canceling all our relationships because we can't tolerate people anymore. We really do need to learn how to communicate what our needs are, right? And then it's up to the other person to meet you halfway. So the next thing I want you to pay attention to is persistent lack of respect of your boundaries or values. So this usually shows you patterns that have been in the relationship for a long time. And now suddenly, for you, it no longer works. You may have been a doormat, or perhaps you, had very different boundaries, and the ones that you have now are about mattering and respecting and loving yourself and voicing your needs, and the relationship was built on the foundation that you didn't matter, perhaps, or not that much, right? That you weren't the most important person in the relationship. And so you'll see that shift. And again, you're trying to communicate and allowing that person to meet you in the middle. And when they don't show up in the middle and they can't show up, then it's time to recognize how that feels. You're looking for red flags physically and emotionally. I mean, that is definitely your main focus, is how do I feel with these people? But these are also some of the situations, like, for instance, another one is loss of genuine connection and mutual support. Perhaps you're done being the therapist in the relationship. Maybe that is how the relationship was built, that you were always there for that person, but that person wasn't always really there for you. And now you want someone who can show up for you and mutually support you. And you want to pay attention. If the efforts you are making to change this in the relationship are met with either disregard or resistance in some way, that relationship you're going to find is not working for you. And we're going to dive in a little more to these in a minute. But I just want you to pay attention to, are you avoiding them? Are you avoiding spending time with them? Are you making plans out of obligation because you should or you have to, not because you want to? That's a really big thing to pay attention to, right? Were you wound mates? Maybe the relationship was based on shared wounds, and therefore the focus is always on what's going wrong, right? Wound mates tend to really identify with their pain and their victimhood. They tend to over-identify with their pain and their victimhood. And perhaps now you've learned to receive love and how to get your needs met in other ways. So you don't need to be that victim. You don't need to be in a place where you're living through your wound and getting seen through it. So you want to feel good and you want to bring more happiness and acceptance in your life. But you find all your attempts to bring the relationship into a higher vibration zone is not working. Everyone is on their own path. It's okay that they are not keeping up with you. It is not yours to fix. They are in their own process, and that relationship may no longer serve you any longer. And last, the things that you did together, the interests you shared, even what you talked about, no longer feels good. So you're paying attention to, again, how you're feeling physically and emotionally, energetically. Perhaps you used to party all the time and you drank a lot together and it was a lot of fun, but you aren't doing that anymore, that you can't do it anymore. Perhaps it makes you unwell and you're really having to make shifts in your life to sort of be this higher vibration. And, maybe you're eating differently. Maybe, we're such sensitive people that our health does require things of us. We could live that life for only so long and then find that we can't do it any longer. But perhaps, you spent a lot of time gossiping. That's what they do. Maybe that's quote unquote, oh, that's who they are. They are always talking about people. But that might not feel good anymore. You don't like how it feels. So we're going to look at both when to really know that it's time to end a relationship or a friendship and when it's time to make adjustments to the friendship. Your work right now is not to try to change or fix others. That will only backfire, okay? So meeting people where they're at is your job right now. Recognizing everyone has different paths. And while it is sad that you might be outgrowing the path that you've been on with this person, you clearly know this is a space you can't live in anymore. It doesn't feel good anymore. And sometimes it means adjusting, like even sometimes it can mean that you visit that space, right? Like you see those people and you go and you have fun. We'll talk more about what adjustments look like. But sometimes it means the relationship needs to end in order for you to move forward. And then it's really hard for you to move forward without the relationship ending. It's almost a crucial part of moving forward to some people, especially if it's in a marriage or something that's pretty an intense, a central relationship of yours. So number one, we're going to look at consistent disrespect for boundaries. That is a big red flag. If someone in your life does not like your boundaries, hear me out. There's mild levels of this, and then there's toxic levels of this, okay? So sometimes in our relationships, when we start setting up boundaries, people don't like them. They're not used to them. They have to adjust. When you're looking at somebody whose relationship you need to end, you're looking at somebody who blatantly disrespects your boundaries, regardless of your communications around them, regardless of you trying to resolve the conflict around it. The person continues to pressure you to attend things or do things you don't want to do, dismisses your needs, right? Dismisses your needs for personal space, self-care. If somebody is not allowing you to take care of yourself and do what's right for you, or doesn't respect the boundaries you put out, it is not going to be a relationship you can grow in. If there's toxic patterns in the behaviors, right? Whether this be a partner or a friendship, but if a partner or a friend engages in manipulative behavior, such as gaslighting, constant criticism, maybe they're constantly criticizing the things you're doing that are the actual spiritual practices that you're doing. Maybe you're meditating, maybe you're doing all these things. And so they get really triggered in that. Toxic dynamics harm your emotional and spiritual health, making it impossible to thrive in the relationship. I can't tell you how many times the most common patterns I actually see when people have to end a relationship. And to do so is so against character, but it is something they absolutely have to do. It is when they are getting out of relationships with people who portray themselves as almost narcissistic, that they realize they've been in a relationship with somebody who benefited from that relationship only, and that they controlled and manipulated and got them to do things all the time that they didn't really want to do. And that there is no empathy. There's no empathy. There's no care that's genuine for this other person. So if you find yourself that's number one. If you find yourself in that relationship, then that is a relationship that will need to end. Because it's impossible to thrive in that relationship. It'll always set you back. It is erosive to your self-esteem. It will ask you over and over again to self-abandon, and no friendship or relationship should ask you over and over again to self-abandon. And so sometimes if that's family, it gets a little trickier, and we need to learn to navigate that if you feel like, okay, I can't end this relationship, it's my mother or my father or my sister, I don't want to end it, but you're going to need to look at significant space and boundaries with this person. And it could take a long time before they actually respect it. And they may not. It is up to you how to navigate it. But it's very difficult because it can actually really affect our health. The second one that's really, really common, we talked about consistent disrespect for boundaries. We talked about those toxic patterns of behavior that are kind of narcissistic. And the other one that's really, really popular that comes up a lot, the most important one I see all the time, is just that energy drain and negativity where you leave that person frequently feeling lower than you went in, right? So a friendship that revolves around gossiping or pessimism or leaving you feeling depleted and misaligned every interaction. If there's a relationship that constantly lowers your vibration, it just may not align with your higher self. Though, your whole being is starting to expand when you do this work. And people with really constricted low energy are very difficult to be around. And that's why that saying has said as your vibration, raises up and you start to expand, people will vibe out of your life, meaning their vibration will not match yours. And so that is actually also a relationship to get space with. We can talk about when to potentially turn that into an adjustment. But many times until that person is ready to look at stuff and to heal, that is not a relationship that's going to work very well for you. It's possibly likely one that you'll have to end for now or create great space with if it's ongoing. This does not mean that, your friend's going through a hard time and, gosh, this is really exhausting. We show up for our friends, right? That's part of the pact. We honor emotion. We honor, the process. We do self-care. We create space when it's needed, and we do what we need to do to be well in it. But when it's time to leave is when somebody is consistently, whether it's the attachments they have to their pain or their victim state or just the negative way in which they view life and people and the way they judge, those things might be not for you any longer. Okay. And, the last one's kind of an obvious one. It's just that incompatibility of core values. Maybe your partner or a friend or family member tends to dismiss your spiritual stuff, right, as unimportant, refuses to engage in any conversations, but just really has different values than you, because that's something that really can shift and change. They're always been our values. Typically, the values that you step into in your spiritual development tend to be the values that have always been true to you. But unfortunately, being the empath and being the sensitive soul, you have been a lot of things to a lot of people. And so it's kind of more like coming home to your truth, these values, not coming up with new ones, right? And so where you once tolerated somebody with very different kind of values or ways of being in the world, and now they misalign with you, and it's a persistent disconnection that cannot be bridged. Like there has to be a shared effort on both parts. That person needs to shift and appreciate your values and be open to them and want to share them and want to applaud you for them, I guess, but support you. But usually when people have very different values, it can be threatening to the other person. So those are areas in which we really want to look for these red flags. Our relationships are mirrors of our inner world. And while spiritual growth may bring challenges, it does also bring opportunities for deeper, more authentic connections for those who choose to grow alongside you. So it's not all bad, right? We can actually deepen our relationships and create really beautiful connections through this. So it is important in the relationships that you want to keep that you respect others for where they're at. You try to approach change with love patience, discernment. Many times when we raise our vibration, it can have a positive impact on those around us, like our family, our friends. Sometimes we can even notice that we were the ones sucking all the energy from other people or our homes, or being in our defenses all the time, how we were feeling so depleted all the time, where we were living on a lower vibration. Now, as we start to raise it, we can tend to, as we've talked about in this podcast, as being healers, energetically, we're healing other people all the time just with our higher vibration. So as you're expanding in your vibration, there's a lot of people who will be happy to see you more radiant, to see you happier. They will also benefit from that energy. They will benefit from it. And then also, sometimes people can be triggered by our changes, right? It can feel like it makes them feel a little resistant to the change. And so let's talk about that, because that's the area where we can make adjustments in the relationship. So sometimes there's like this temporary resistance to what's happening. Usually it looks like that maybe they're skeptical. When you want to share what's going on with you, they put it down, or they don't really know what to do with it, and they're feeling really skeptical. They don't relate to it. They may feel unconsciously threatened because for them, they may feel like you are suddenly going to start judging them and try to get them to do things they have zero interest in, that they're not comfortable with, that you're going to want them to be different, that you're going to outgrow them. There's all these fears and, things deep down inside that feel kind of scary and set off little alarms within them. You've been this safe person in this zone, and now you're going to switch lanes. And what does that mean for them? How is that going to impact the relationship? And so it's really common to find some people get kind of triggered in that and don't actually act the way, you'd really love them to. So the adjustment that's needed, you can decide to take them on the ride with you. For example, share all the details of all the crazy things you're doing, or just share, your experiences meditating, or you're letting them in on the world, right? Maybe you did this really crazy table tipping the other night, right? I did that recently. It was really cool. Maybe you're doing something that's, very different in their world. You're going to mediums, you're doing this work, right? You're getting your human design done. You're getting all these things, and they're like, oh, okay. They don't really know what to do with that. And so you can decide how much you're going to let them in. You can test them out, give them a little bit by a little bit. You can kind of take it slow. You can also decide that relationship can remain in its own little corner with very gradual exposure, and it's okay to have friends that aren't on the spiritual journey with you. You don't want everybody to be like you. We want to have lots of different kinds of people. And so we can say, oh, that's the person I love to do this thing with. We love to go to the beach together. We love to do these things together. Maybe you can keep it light, and you can maybe you find that I don't need to have those really deep conversations with her. That's not what that's for, right? I'm getting fed somewhere else to have that. And so I appreciate what this relationship is like for me. And just really looking and seeing how can it fit in your life, because obviously you must want it to, because if there's no harm being done, if the person generally supports you and is wanting to be in your corner but doesn't really know how, then that's a relationship you can sort of adjust. And people are on different growth paces. A friend may not be on a spiritual path, but remain supportive and curious about your journey. And so perhaps over time, you really rub off on them and open them up to this whole other ways of thinking, and they kind of start to like it. So you're really focusing on shared interests. You're making sure that your boundaries are being honored, that your self-care is being honored. These people that choose to stay in your life should have the capacity to love you and accept you for your differences. They should cheer you on regardless of having no clue what you're talking about, right? We want to surround ourselves with people who see the best in us, who believe in us, who have our backs, and to cheer us on. If these people don't get it and they don't know how to show up, but they're those people, they still want to cheer you on. They still love you. They still want to be in your corner. Those are the people you make adjustments with, right? And your job is to offer patience and gradual exposure to your practices, perhaps, but allowing them to just understand your growth over time. Another area where we need to look at, okay, this is a relationship that needs adjustments. This happens a lot with our partners, our significant others, but also can happen in friendships and family when we start to have communication style conflicts. So you might have started to adopt more compassionate communication methods. You have a wider palette for options of how to discuss something. You start to be able to hold space for people. You start to be able to show up with curiosity instead of being in your defense. You're starting to open up and see the person as a whole versus just your response to them, right? Just your reaction to them. You're looking at working on your triggers and not being triggered and trying to be present. And the other person isn't doing that work, right? As long as these people are not diminishing you, belittling you, being abusive in the relationship, if they are people who love you and want to be in your corner and want to do that, but you can see they're getting stuck in their stuff and they're not communicating well, this is where you can kind of make that decision. The bottom line really is sometimes you just modeling this healthy communication and inviting open dialogue of how you can meet each other's needs. If you can allow that to take some time and be patient for that person to start to learn that, if you can demonstrate that, model it, then you're likely to potentially see somebody start to shift themselves when they feel safe in the relationship. And maybe they don't feel very safe when it comes to conflict and things like that. But sometimes friendships are meant to wax and wane, and other relationships as well. It's normal for life to take you in different directions. Your job, when you start to notice, like, wow, this seems like it's all changing, is to try to go with the flow and do your own work on managing your feelings of over responsibility and guilt. Sometimes empaths, we have a hard time. Sometimes we can feel like we are the problem, or, especially if you have a strong people pleasing in you. You can even try to fight for a relationship you don't even want, right? Because you just can't handle that feeling of guilt or over responsibility that you might be doing something wrong here. And so we want to just start to work on what's it like for us to just allow, what's it like for us to just be in flow without flooding ourselves with it's our fault, or we should feel bad, or we should feel guilt or shame. We have to allow people to show up in ways that work for them. And then we get to decide if that works for us, right? Now, I have seen people use being spiritually awakened as a way to avoid responsibility in their lives. And I want to just put this out there. As if their self-development kicks them up a notch into a position of hierarchy where they feel better than other people. And they can do shitty things and be like, oh, well, my guides told me, something like that, right? This just isn't an alignment for me any longer. Where they can even start to use that very lofty language where they're not really showing up and being real, right? This is an ego state. It is a shadow part that needs to be healed. It can also be what happens when someone with more narcissistic tendencies and very little empathy and self-awareness decides they want to be a guru. That happens. But also, this can happen to the best of us. But even the average empath or spiritually curious person, it can also be a time of feeling like you know what's best for other people. You're experiencing this new awakening to another way of being, and you're realizing how big an impact this is having on your life. And you know a better way to be in your life. The doors are open. But part of the spiritual path is you taking responsibility for yourself and accepting what is for others, okay? Accepting what is. happening outside you. I know that it can be hard work cutting attachments that you have with other people that require them to be different than how they are in this moment. You can look at a friend or your significant other or a family member and say, oh, they should really be like this. They should really be like that. This is how they should look. This is how they should do what they should do. This would be so much better for them, right? We have all these opinions and judgments because, they're really just reflections of our own insecurities. They're really reflections of what we want for ourselves and all that. But looking at our attachments to controlling other people allows us to realize we are actually attempting to quiet our own discomfort. Maybe you are uncomfortable in your judgments, or perhaps uncomfortable in your own poor energetic boundaries that you're taking on the energies of other people and you're feeling overwhelmed by them. And so you feel like they should change because it'll make you feel better. It'll make you feel better if they do the things you think they should do, right? And so because it's making you uncomfortable, they may be just fine with where they're at. Or perhaps they complain all the time and don't want to do anything about it. They just are attached to being stuck. We have to let them sit in that. Be where they're at. Release the attachments we have to taking over, getting them to show up differently in their lives, trying to control it. That just leads to resentment. And practice trusting others to fall down and get stuck on their own path and figure it out for themselves. This allows them to learn the lessons and the skills, possibly on a different timeline than you. It's also possible that they never change. And that's really hard. And it's really sad. It's really sad to watch somebody that we love, that we struggle with so much. And it is not your job to force the change, okay? Because that won't really ever work. It is your job to decide whether or not this relationship works for you any longer. And that's a hard one. But it is one that eventually we do get kind of pushed in the corner and have to make. Making compromises in relationships is a given. But it cannot steal your light. It cannot keep you from growing and glowing, right? Like you have to be able to raise your vibration. You have to be able to expand in your own energy body. That's what you're here for as a sensitive being. And as you move forward in this life, you will be unhealthy, potentially sick or unwell, as we've discussed in previous episodes. As an empath or sensitive soul, your health is dependent on your life choices, on what you surround yourself with, what you create, and will usually tell you when things are going south, right? So if you're not feeling well, it's important for you to look at your relationships, or the choices, the things that are happening in life, what you're doing right now, what you're doing with your time, where your energy is leaking. So let's talk about how to approach both endings and adjustments, because we want to do it with grace. We want to do it with compassion. That's what's most in alignment for us. For endings, we want to practice gratitude for the role the relationship played in your life and release it without blame. Cord cutting is an awesome meditation, very powerful way to release people and send them with love. However you can send people with love, as often as you can send people with love, is so important because you're trying to do the work of releasing them, detaching, having compassion for them and having compassion for you in this process. For adjustments, you're prioritizing open communication. You're trying to be patient, working on mutual respect, and to nurture the connection as it evolves and to see where it goes as you step into this new sense of yourself. And when we choose to end a relationship, it can include grief. In fact, it can include both grief and relief. We can feel disappointment and sadness, and perhaps even hurt and rejection, and simultaneously at times feel lighter. Practice feeling your feelings and letting go of needing for things to be different. That is like the core right there. It's just, how can I just have these feelings I'm having? Feel these feelings I'm having, and really recognize when I might be attaching to wanting things to be different. Whatever grief or sadness or hope there is, Just allow it all. Notice what surrendering and allowing can actually feel like in your body, versus constriction of efforting and trying to control. Eventually, your goal is neutrality. You want to get to a neutral place. If you're up in your head spinning over what was said and what was done and what wasn't said and what wasn't done, then you are not in a place of neutrality. And that is going to be your work to release, detach, right? You're detaching from your need for it to be any different and being with what is. And with what is might make you feel sad that person couldn't show up for you the way that they were supposed to in your head, right? The way that you wanted them to. Whatever grief or emotions that come up, your job is just to sit with that until you can bring in enough love and compassion for everybody to get to a place of neutrality. So practice visualizations. I find that really helpful. I feel like I'm always talking about it, but I feel like you can't say it enough because, your brain believes what you visualize. Your body responds. Your energy body responds. It's so powerful. So just visualizing divine light to fill up all the spaces where this gray or muddy emotional parts are hanging out. You are consciously drawing light into your heart and your whole being and asking for divine guidance to support you. Now, you're not asking for guidance to help you get rid of the issue because that is just resistance to what's happening. And you're trying to be in a neutral place, right? So if you're like, please just make this all go away, take this away. That is actually you still being in resistance to it because it is what it is and it is happening. And so your job is to get to a place of neutrality. So you're asking for guidance to help you come back to surrendering. Help me come back to love and acceptance. Help me see the path forward. What does it look like to be moving forward in a path that feels like peace, right? That's what your soul wants. It wants peace. That's all it ever wants. It wants love. It wants peace and freedom. So it's not easy to navigate these situations. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling lonely because this shift has happened in multiple relationships, I offer hope. That has happened to me too. And it happens to a lot of people. You are feeling this way because you are in the gap, or you're in what I call the in-between. You are between the ending of one life and the beginning of another. And that's a really hard place to be. I just want to encourage you to hold faith that fulfilling relationships and new experiences are on their way in their own time. Every part of our experience is equal, okay? So the good times and the bad ones, right? The hard times and the good times. Right now is as important a part of your becoming as anything else. So some work can only be done alone, and some work can only be done in relationships. And I tell this to people all the time because we sometimes feel like when we are alone, we should have people, and when we're with people, we wonder, can we do this work? We are meant to do the work separately. Sometimes you need to be alone, and sometimes you need to be in relationship. And that's the only way the work gets done. Your job is to just keep following the breadcrumbs. And eventually lessons will be revealed. New energies will move in. Start to raise up that vibration. Start to have faith in what's coming and imagining what's coming and putting yourselves in situations that allow this to happen. Opening up your heart that might be guarded. We can still kind of feel guarded when we get hurt. You got to keep your faith that there are people who are going to hold space. There are people that are going to connect. You're going to have fun again in those ways and really deeply connect with people. We're all connected going through it in this life, even the people who are not at the same place as you. And so we just need to try to be as compassionate as possible to ourselves first. You want to talk about having more loving relationships, more open relationships, more worthy relationships. That all rests upon the foundation of you believing in your own worth, you having a deeply loving relationship with yourself, right? That is the foundation. And then comes those relationships that just make total sense to that foundation. But if you don't have that foundation in place, that is your work now, my friend, right? Like that is it. I am sending so much love and light your way. I am really excited for your becoming and how things will start unfolding for you. And I trust that even hearing this today will hopefully remind you that this is deep work that's happening, and it's worthy work, and that the things that are happening have meaning, even if they feel a little disjointed right now. Now, if there is something you would like for me to explore on the show or you'd like to learn more about, I'd love to hear about it. You can message me at Michelle Poverman on Instagram or Facebook, or email me at michelle@sageandstone.org. The links will be in the show notes. I'd love to know if there's anything you'd like for me to explore or something that you haven't heard yet that you're interested in. I hope this was helpful. I'll talk to you next week, and bye for now. Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. Everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers. Until next time.